Good afternoon. Good afternoon, bookworms. Happy Monday. It is lovely to see all of you who are not here. Wait a second. Somebody just jumped in on the chat. Little butterfly, hello, darling. It's just you and me today, at least for now. Happy to see you. I think it's a little different that I do a reading on Monday afternoon. Usually I do these readings in the morning. But anyway, just work has been doing its thing. And so I had to change a little bit of the schedule. But we are still doing readings. And I did want to do a reading, especially today, because I had postponed the Friday reading. So thank you for joining me. Also, a huge hello to Noodles, Dumplings, Kimchi, who is also here. Yeah, there's only 3 of us, so let's just have a chat. Now, I'm just gonna go ahead and, go as usual, because I'm sure there'll be people who will want to catch up later and do the reread. So, I'm continuing reading Jane Eyre, of course. We are at session 19. Definitely, in the last third of the book. So, as you guys remember, Jane left Thornfield, and she wandered about, destitute, and until right now she found the Rivers kids, and she's staying with them. They graciously took her in. So we're gonna have a chapter where she's just learning to adjust to this new life, gonna figure out if she finds a job, and if she does, or at least if Rivers finds her a job, St. John finds her a job, and what it might be. It seems like she's getting along. She might get along with the family, but we don't know yet if that's just for now. Who knows? We will find out today. Yes, so I hope you guys had a wonderful Father's Day. I wasn't able to celebrate it with my dad on the day off because he and my mom went out on a trip the day before. So Father's Day was a lonely day indeed. It was quite sad, but I spent most of it just sleeping for the most part, and watching some shows and hanging out with my sister. Because the entire week before I had been pulling late nighters, and I was just really tired from work and getting out of video. So happy to have done the Father's Day special. And as always, if you guys saw it, good. If you haven't, go and check it out. It was a really fun chat that I had with Nick from the Discord server. Let's see. What else? No, that's about it. I have, I guess, too blessed to be stressed. So, you guys, I do believe that unless you have any other questions or anything to share, I think we should just head on into Jane Eyre. Another thing, I had a little bit of extra time yesterday, so I did work in editing some Blue Castle. So I finished editing session 3. So session 3 is done. And I'm just dying to give you guys a peek of how I'm doing this. But we agreed that I wouldn't release anything until I was done with the whole thing. So I'm just gonna have to keep on toiling away. Oh look, there's Crusher. Hi Crusher, happy to see you. And also Little Butterfly says the video was great. I'm glad you liked it. It was really fun, and I think plenty of people also enjoyed it. I think it had I got quite a lot of positive feedback on it. So I don't know, maybe when it's Mother's Day, I'll do another one. Who knows? I really want to talk about Elvira, Best Mom. But I feel like if I were to put a competition between Aoife and Elvira, there would be hands flying. I don't know if people would what would people think of the placement I would give? Because hands down, Gunther is best dad, you guys. Gunther is best dad. In the noble sphere and the commoner sphere, best dad. But some people might say that Elvira is best mom, and others would say Aoife is best mom. I have my own thoughts, and I think I've shared them with you guys too. But who knows, if I don't say the right thing, some people said, okay, there was this person that said, I swore that if you did not choose Gunther as best dad, I would never watch one of your videos again. I was like, whoa. Well, I'm glad I don't take comments very seriously. So yeah, I'm glad that you guys checked it out. Thank you, Little Butterfly, for the positive comment. And hello, Cat Asterisk. Happy to see you. Are you all ready for some Jane Eyre? I certainly am. So let's get this started. Let's read some Jane Eyre. Again, she's staying at the house of the Rivers family. And let's see how she gets along. The recollection of about 3 days and nights succeeding this is very dim in my mind. I can recall some sensations felt in that interval, but few thoughts framed. Wait a second, this is the wrong chapter. All right, here we go. Chapter 30. Man, imagine if I had gone like a whole chapter. By the way, you guys, one time I did a read-along and I started reading the wrong chapter, and this was with the gang, so like this was everybody had their own role to read. And I started reading, and I read like about a paragraph, and nobody told me. Nobody told me until like I was done with the paragraph or halfway through the page. I was like, what the heck? Okay, so I'm glad I found myself out this time. All right, chapter 30. The more I knew of the inmates of Moor House, the better I liked them. In a few days, I had so far recovered my health that I could sit up all day and walk out sometimes. I could join with Diana and Mary in all their occupations, converse with them as much as they wished, and aid them when and where they would allow me. There was a reviving pleasure in this intercourse, of a kind now tasted by me for the first time. The pleasure arising from perfect congeniality of tastes, sentiments, and principles. I liked to read what they liked to read. What they enjoyed delighted me. What they approved I reverenced. They loved their sequestered home. I, too, in the grey, small, antique structure, with its low roof, its latticed casements, its mouldering walls, its avenue of aged firs, all grown aslant under the stress of mountain winds, its garden, dark with yew and holly, and where no flowers but of the hardiest specimens would bloom, found a charm both potent and permanent. They clung to the purple moors behind and around their dwelling, to the hollow vale into which the pebbly bridle path leading from their gate descended, and which wound between fern banks first, and then amongst a few of the wildest little pasture fields that ever bordered a wilderness of heath, or gave sustenance to a flock of grey moorland sheep, with the little mossy-faced lambs. They clung to this scene, I say, with a perfect enthusiasm of attachment. I could comprehend the feeling, and share both its strength and truth. I saw the fascination of the locality. I felt the consecration of its loneliness. My eye feasted on the outline of swell and sweep, on the wild colouring communicated to ridge and dell by moss, by heath bell, by flower-sprinkled turf, by brilliant bracken and mellow granite crag. These details were just to me what they were to them. So many pure and sweet sources of pleasure. The strong blast and the soft breeze, the rough and the halcyon day, the hours of sunrise and sunset, the moonlight and the clouded night developed for me in these regions the same attraction as for them, wound round my faculties the same spell that entranced theirs. Indoors we agreed equally well. They were both more accomplished and better read than I was, but with eagerness I followed in the path of knowledge they had trodden before me. I devoured the books they lent me. Then it was full satisfaction to discuss with them in the evening what I had perused during the day. Thought fitted thought, opinion met opinion. We coincided, in short, perfectly. If in our trio there was a superior and a leader, it was Diana. Physically, she far excelled me. She was handsome, she was vigorous. In her animal spirits there was an affluence of life and certainty of flow such as excited my wonder, while it baffled my comprehension. I could talk a while when the evening commenced, but the first gush of vivacity and fluency gone, I was fain to sit on a stool at Diana's feet, to rest my head on her knee, and listen alternately to her and Mary, while they sounded thoroughly the topic on which I had but touched. Diana offered to teach me German. I liked to learn of her. I saw the part of instructress pleased and suited her. That of a scholar pleased and suited me no less. Our natures dovetailed. Mutual affection of the strongest kind was the result. They discovered I could draw. Their pencils and color boxes were immediately at my service. My skill, greater in this one point than theirs, surprised and charmed them. Mary would sit and watch me by the hour together, then she would take lessons, and a docile, intelligent, assiduous pupil she made. Thus occupied and mutually entertained, days passed like hours, and weeks like days. As to Mr. St. John, the intimacy which had arisen so naturally and rapidly between me and his sisters did not extend to him. One reason of the distance, yet absurd, between us was that he was comparatively seldom at home. A large portion of his time appeared devoted to visiting the sick and poor among the scattered population of his parish. No weather seemed to hinder him in these pastoral excursions. Rain or fair, he would, when his hours of morning study were over, take his hat, and followed by his father's old pointer, Carlo, go out on his mission of love or duty. I scarcely know in which light he regarded it. Sometimes, when the day was very unfavorable, his sisters would expostulate. He would then say, with a peculiar smile, more solemn than cheerful, "And if I let a gust of wind or sprinkling of rain turn me aside from these easy tasks, what preparation would such sloth be for the future I propose to myself?" Diana and Mary's general answer to this question was a sigh, and some minutes of apparently mournful meditation. But besides his frequent absences, there was another barrier to friendship with him. He seemed of a reserved and abstracted, and even of a brooding nature. Zealous. Wait, I thought you liked brooding natures. I guess not this kind of broody. Zealous in his ministerial labors, blameless in his life and habits, he yet did not appear to enjoy that mental serenity, that inward content, which should be the reward of every sincere Christian and practical philanthropist. Often of an evening, when he sat at the window, his desk and papers before him, he would cease reading or writing, rest his chin on his hand, and deliver himself up to I know not what course of thought, but that it was perturbed and exciting might be seen in the frequent flash and changeful dilation of his eye. I think, moreover, that nature was not to him what treasury of delight it was to his sisters. He expressed once, and but once in my hearing, a strong desire of the rugged charm of the hills, and an inborn affection for the dark roof and hoary walls he called his home. But there was more gloom than pleasure in the tone, and words in which the sentiment was manifested, and never did he seem to roam the moors for the sake of their soothing silence, never seek out or dwell upon the thousand peaceful delights they could yield. Incommunicative as he was, some time elapsed before I had an opportunity of gauging his mind. I first got an idea of its caliber when I heard him preach in his own church at Morton. I wish I could describe that sermon, but it is past my power. I cannot even render faithfully the effect it produced on me. It began calm, and indeed, as far as delivery and pitch of voice went, it was calm to the end. An earnestly felt yet strictly restrained zeal breathed soon in the distinct accents, and prompted the nervous language. This grew to force, compressed, condensed, controlled. The heart was thrilled, the mind astonished by the power of the preacher. Neither were softened. Throughout there was a strange bitterness, an absence of consolatory gentleness. Stern allusions to Calvinistic doctrines, election, predestination, reprobation were frequent, and each reference to these points sounded like a sentence pronounced for doom. When he had done, instead of feeling better, calmer, more enlightened by his discourse, I experienced an inexpressible sadness, for it seemed to me, I know not whether equally so to others, that the eloquence to which I had been listening had sprung from a depth where lay turbid dregs of disappointment, where moved troubling impulses of insate yearnings and disquieting aspirations. I was sure St. John Rivers, pure-lived, conscientious, zealous as he was, had not yet found that peace of God which passeth all understanding. He had no more found it, I thought, than had I, with my concealed and raking regrets for my broken idol in lost Elysium, regrets to which I have latterly avoided referring, but which possessed me and tyrannized over me ruthlessly. Meantime, a month was gone. Diana and Mary were soon to leave Moor House and return to the far different life and scene which awaited them, as governesses in a large, fashionable south of England city, where each held a situation in families by whose wealthy and haughty members they were regarded only as humble dependents, and who neither knew nor sought out their innate excellences, and appreciated only their acquired accomplishments as they appreciated the skill of their cook or the taste of their waiting woman. Mr. St. John had said nothing to me yet about the employment he had promised to obtain for me, yet it became urgent that I should have a vocation of some kind. One morning, being left alone with him a few minutes in the parlor, I ventured to approach the window recess, which his table, chair, and desk consecrated as a kind of study, and I was going to speak, though not very well knowing in what words to frame my inquiry, for it is at all times difficult to break the ice of reserve glassing over such natures as his, when he saved me the trouble by being the first to commence in a dialogue. Looking up as I drew near, "You have a question to ask of me?" he said. "Yes. I wish to know whether you have heard of any service I can offer myself to undertake. I found or devised something for you 3 weeks ago, but as you seem both useful and happy here, as my sisters had evidently become attached to you, and your society gave them unusual pleasure, I deemed it inexpedient to break in on your mutual comfort till their approaching departure from Marsh End should render yours necessary." "And they will go in 3 days now?" "Yes, and when they go, I shall return to the parsonage and Morton. Hannah will accompany me, and this old house will be shut up." I waited a few moments, expecting he would go on with the subject first broached, but he seemed to have entered another train of reflection. His look denoted abstraction from me and my business. I was obliged to recall him to a theme which was of necessity one of close and anxious interest to me. "What is the employment you had in view, Mr. Rivers? I hope this delay will not have increased the difficulty of securing it." "Oh, no, since it is an employment which depends only on me to give, and you to accept." He again paused. There seemed a reluctance to continue. I grew impatient. A restless movement or two, and an eager and exacting glance fastened on his face, conveyed the feeling to him as effectually as words could have done, and with less trouble. "You need be in no hurry to hear," he said. "Let me frankly tell you, I have nothing eligible or profitable to suggest. Before I explain, recall, if you please, my notice, clearly given, that if I helped you, it must be as a blind man would help the lame. I am poor, for I find that, when I have paid my father's debts, all the patrimony remaining to me will be this crumbling grange, the row of scathed firs behind, and the patch of moorage soil, with the yew trees and holly bushes in front. I am obscure, Rivers is an old name, but of the three sole descendants of the race, two earned the dependent's crust among strangers, and the third considers himself an alien from his native country, not only for life, but in death. Yes, and deems, and is bound to deem, himself honored by the lot, and aspires but after the day when the cross of separation from fleshly ties shall be laid on his shoulders, and when the head of that church militant of those humblest members he is one, shall give the word, rise and follow me. Yo, Sinjin, she's asking about her, not about you. We know you're troubled inside. Who knows what's going on, but we don't care. She doesn't care. Why are you telling her? All right, whatever. Sinjin said these words as he pronounced his sermons, with a quiet, deep voice, with an unflushed cheek, and a coruscating radiance of glance. He reassumed, and, since I am myself poor and obscure, I can offer you but a service of poverty and obscurity. You may even think it degrading, for I see now your habits have been what the world calls refined. Your tastes lean to the ideal, and your society has at least been among the educated. But I consider that no service degrades which can better our race. I hold that the more arid and unreclaimed the soil with the Christian laborer's task of tillage is appointed him, the scantier the meed his toil brings, the higher the honor. His, under such circumstances, is the destiny of the pioneer, and the first pioneers of the gospel were the apostles. Their captain was Jesus, the Redeemer himself. Well, I said as he again paused, proceed. He looked at me before he proceeded. Indeed, he seemed leisurely to read my face, as if its features and lines were characters on a page. The conclusions drawn from this scrutiny he partially expressed in his succeeding observations. Noodles Dumplings Kimchi says, he sounds like full of himself, self-righteous teenager. Yeah, he's having his own emo. Yeah, he's having his own thing. We'll learn soon enough what's his deal. But yeah, he's super emo right now. So yeah, I think Jane did point out that in general he seems like he's disappointed, disillusioned, with whatever his lot in life. Though, he's like saying like, yeah, I aspire to serve God, but he's already serving God and he's still unhappy. Like, Sinjin, come on, dude. Anyway. So meanwhile, Jane is like, okay, my dude, can you get to the point? What's my next job? Like, what am I supposed to do now? But no, he's continuing on. Yes, he is full of himself. Noodles, dumplings, kimchi. Okay, he looked at me before he proceeded. Indeed, he seemed leisurely to read my face, as if its features and lines were characters on a page. The conclusions drawn from this scrutiny he partially expressed in his succeeding observations. I believe you will accept the post I offer you, said he, and hold it for a little while. Not permanently, though, any more than I could permanently keep the narrow and narrowing, the tranquil hidden office of English country incumbent. For, in your nature is an alloy as detrimental to repose as that in mine, though of a different kind. Do explain, I urged, when he halted once more. I will. He keeps halting. What the heck, dude? Do explain. I will. And you shall hear how poor the proposal is, how trivial, how cramping. I shall not stay long at Morton, now that my father is dead, and that I am my own master. I shall leave the place probably in the course of a 12-month. But while I do stay, I will exert myself to the utmost for its improvement. Morton, when I came to it 2 years ago, had no school. The children of the poor were excluded from every hope of progress. I established one for boys. I mean now to open a second school for girls. I have hired a building for the purpose, with a cottage of 2 rooms attached to it for the mistress's house. Her salary will be £30 a year. Her house is already furnished, very simply, but sufficiently, by the kindness of a lady, Miss Oliver. the only daughter of the sole rich man in my parish, Mr. Oliver, the proprietor of a needle factory and iron foundry in the valley. The same lady pays for the education and clothing of an orphan from the workhouse, on condition that she shall aid the mistress in such menial offices connected with her own house, and the school as her occupation of teaching will prevent her having time to discharge in person. Will you be this mistress? He put the question rather hurriedly. He seemed half to expect an indignant or at least a disdainful rejection of the offer. Not knowing all my thoughts and feelings, though guessing some, he could not tell in what light the lot would appear to me. In truth, it was a humble, but then it was sheltered. No, in truth, it was humble, but then it was sheltered, and I wanted a safe asylum. It was plodding, but then, compared with that of a governess in a rich house, it was independent, and the fear of servitude with strangers entered my soul like iron. It was not ignoble, not unworthy, not mentally degrading. I made my decision. I thank you for the proposal, Mr. Rivers, and I accept it with all my heart. But you comprehend me, he said. It is a village school. Your scholars will be only poor girls, cottagers, children, at the best farmers' daughters. Knitting, sewing, reading, writing, ciphering will be all you will have to teach. What will you do with your accomplishments? What with the largest portion of mind, sentiments, tastes? Save them till they are wanted. They will keep. You know what you undertake, then? I do. He now smiled, and not a bitter or a sad smile, but one well pleased and deeply gratified. And when will you commence the exercise of your function? I will go to my house tomorrow, and open the school if you like next week. Very well, so be it. He rose and walked through the room. Standing still, he again looked at me. He shook his head. What do you disapprove of, Mr. Rivers? I asked. You will not stay at Morton long. No, no. Why? What is your reason for saying so? I read it in your eye. It is not of that description which promises the maintenance of an even tenor in life. I am not ambitious. He started at the word ambitious. He repeated, No, what made you think of ambition? Who's ambitious? I know I am, but how did you find it out? I was speaking of myself. Well, if you're not ambitious, you are... What? I was going to say impassioned, but perhaps you would have misunderstood the word and have been displeased. I mean that human affections and sympathies have a most powerful hold on you. I am sure you cannot long be content to pass your leisure in solitude, and to devote your working hours to a monotonous labor wholly void of stimulus, any more than I can be content, he added with emphasis, to live here buried in morass, pent in with mountains. My nature, that God gave me contravened, my faculties heaven bestowed, paralyzed, made useless. You hear now how I contradict myself, I, who preach contentment with the humble lot, and justify the vocation even of hewers of wood and drawers of water in God's service. I, his ordained minister, almost rave in my restlessness. Well, propensities and principles must be reconciled by some means. He left the room. In this brief hour, I had learnt more of him than in the whole previous month. Yet he still puzzled me. Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you're not... Why would anybody want to get to know more about St. John? But yeah, back to what the job that she has been offered and she has accepted. I like how Little Butterfly points it out. Her dream of being a teacher. Yeah, so she has a dream of being a teacher. Remember way back then when she first started working, she was saying like, I will one day like to like set up my own little school. Of course, though, being a teacher of a school for farm people and humble folk would be different from the ideal that she has, where she could teach, women, like young ladies of, families that have money, so that she could make a proper living out of it and have staff. It's different. In this situation, it's just not her school. She's basically getting paid to like £30 a year by like the patron of the town. So while she's teaching, she may call some shots, but the money does not come from her. The money comes from somebody else. So I think the kind of school she wants to set up would be a school where she could call the shots and definitely get like richer pupils, so that it would be a nicer establishment that she could teach arts and music and all the things that she won't be able to teach in this school. In this school, she won't be able to teach music, French, art, all those things. They're not needed, unfortunately. So she'll just have to make do. But she's definitely prepared to do it. It's just humble work. But St. John is predicting that her nature is, he said impassioned, but I'm guessing, I guess it is true. She is very restless. You guys remember, even when she was in Thornfield, she already felt restless by being imprisoned or being penned in the house for the entire winter. So I see her also like eventually getting restless. But anyway, right now it's just what she needs, and she's thankful for it. I mean, it's better than wandering around begging in the streets, right? So yeah. I don't know what's the deal with St. John. Well, I do know what's the deal with St. John, so just keep on reading. Let's continue on. He left the room. In this brief hour, I had learned more of him than in the whole previous month. Yet, he still puzzled me. Oh, Crusher says, I like how Brontë juxtaposes Rochester's fiery nature and St. John River's lofty, let me see. Yeah, icy ambition. Yeah. Yes, so notice they're both kind of brooding. They're both brooders. But one of them, like Jane, was like, I feel okay with him. Like, I don't care. Like, I feel. And the other one kind of like petrifies a little, like kind of off-putting. Like yeah, it's a different kind of nature. They're both brooders. But yeah, you get two different people. You also, it's important that she goes out into the world. Like I said, up until she met Mary and Diana, she had always been like either with fellow students or teachers, and like, and they all kind of had the same education, kind of read the same book. So but these kids, their mother was a very well-educated woman. Remember, the father he liked to be an outdoorsy kind of guy, but the mother was a very well-educated woman, and they all took after her. They all were like loved books and reading and all that stuff. So it's good that she is able to find this kind of like friendship in other people, because as far as we remember, Rochester was the only person she had met up until now that she could find like some one-on-one discourse, like the conversation would flow nicely. So because I think in part of her being so little used to society, she grew even more attached to him, and she had no other choice but there was no one else really to talk to. I mean, you couldn't really talk with Mrs. Fairfax, the housekeeper, or Adele, or Sophie. So it's good that she's finding some minds that are open, educated, that they're not, like, they haven't been sullied and are not bitter like Rochester was. He was informed that he did read a lot and he had traveled, but there was always like this undercurrent of like all this experience came at a cost. He experienced a lot of things, saw a lot of things, but he did also a lot of things that he would have been better off if he hadn't. So yeah. So yeah, it's good to see how she's getting along with these people. But yeah, St. John is, I don't, he's not my favorite, but he's a very interesting character. Well, yes, and he's definitely a foil to Rochester. Um, so we'll continue reading. Diana and Mary Rivers became more sad and silent as the day approached for leaving their brother and their home. They both tried to appear as usual, but the sorrow they had to struggle against was one that could not be entirely conquered or concealed. Diana intimated that this would be a different parting from any they had ever known. It would probably, as far as St. John was concerned, be a parting for years. It might be a parting for life. He will sacrifice all to his long-framed resolves, she said. Natural affection and feelings more potent still. St. John looks quiet, Jane, but he hides a fever in his vitals. You would think him gentle, yet in some things he is inexorable as death. And the worst of it is, my conscience will hardly permit me to dissuade him from his severe decision. Certainly I cannot for a moment blame him for it. It is right, noble, Christian, yet it breaks my heart. And the tears gushed to her fine eyes. Mary bent her head low over her work. We are now without father. We shall soon be without home and brother, she murmured. At that moment, a little accident supervened, which seemed decreed by fate purposely to prove the truth of the adage, that misfortunes never come singly, and to add to their distress the vexing one of the slip between the cup and the lip. St. John passed the window, reading a letter. He entered. Our Uncle John is dead, said he. Both the sisters seemed struck, not shocked or appalled. The tidings appeared in their eyes rather momentous than afflicting. Dead? Repeated Diana. Yes. She riveted a searching gaze on her brother's face. And what then? She demanded in a low voice. What then, Di? He replied, maintaining a marble immobility of feature. What then? Why, nothing. Read. He threw the letter into her lap. She glanced over it and handed it to Mary. Mary perused it in silence and returned it to her brother. All three looked at each other, and all three smiled, a dreary, pensive smile enough. Amen. We can yet live, said Diana at last. At any rate, it makes us no worse off than we were before, remarked Mary. Only it forces rather strongly on the mind the picture of what might have been, said Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, said Mr. Rivers, and contrasts it somewhat too vividly with what is. He folded the letter, locked it in his desk, and again went out. For some minutes no one spoke. Diana turned to me. Jane, you will wonder at us and our mysteries, and think us hard-hearted beings to not be more moved at the death of so near a relation as an uncle. We have never seen him or known him. He was my mother's brother. My father and he quarrelled long ago. It was by his advice that my father risked most of his property in the speculation that ruined him. Mutual recrimination passed between them, and they parted in anger and were never reconciled. My uncle engaged afterwards in more prosperous undertakings. It appears he realized a fortune of 20,000 pounds. He was never married, and had no near kindred but ourselves and one other person, not more closely related than we. My father always cherished the idea that he would atone for his error by leaving his possessions to us. That letter informs us that he has bequeathed every penny to the other relation, with the exception of 30 guineas, to be divided between St. John, Diana, and Mary Rivers, for the purchase of 3 mourning rings. He had a right, of course, to do as he pleased, and yet a momentary damp is cast on the spirits by the receipt of such news. Mary and I would have esteemed ourselves rich with 1,000 pounds each, and so St. John such a sum would have been valuable, for the good it would have enabled him to do. This explanation given, the subject was dropped, and no further reference made to it either by Mr. Rivers or his sisters. The next day, I left Marsh End for Morton. The day after, Diana and Mary quitted it for distant B blank. I'm guessing Bristol? I don't know. For distant blank. In a week, Mr. Rivers and Hannah departed to the parsonage, and so the old Grange was abandoned. End of chapter. So, you guys are laughing at me at the Mr. Rogers. So I'm thinking there could be several Mr. Rogers. I'm thinking one is Uncle Roger, but another thing is there used to be this, of course, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and such and such. But also, anybody seen anybody seen, what was it? Not 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club. The Breakfast Club had a stupid scene, of course. It's when there's this kid, the geeky kid, they're all in detention on Saturday, and the bad kid is looking at the geeky kid, set out his lunch, his milk, his sandwich, his banana, all the things. And he kind of makes fun of him because he sees all of the food groups represented in the lunch. It's so such a a mama's boy, as of course contrasted with him who's been neglected. Anyways, but he's like, oh, I see all food groups represented. Is your mom married to Mr. Rogers? And then the other boy, not remotely sensing he's being trolled a little, he says, no, she's married to Mr. Johnson. I don't know. I always found that hilarious. So lame. I'm sorry, you guys. Breakfast Club. Wait, what? Breakfast Club? Crusher, you have not watched The Breakfast Club? The Breakfast Club is... it's a great movie. It's from the 80s, 1985. Here you go. The Breakfast Club. Yeah, let's see the ads and stuff. Basically, it's about some kids that are left get in trouble and are in detention for several reasons. Anyway, so I mean, it's not an oh my gosh a good movie, but it is I have watched it at least more than twice. So I usually have movies. I either will watch. Oh, here, I think this is it. No, never mind. This is not it. I think they have yeah, there's movies that I will watch once and never again because I don't care. But if there's movies that are rewatchable, I probably will watch them more than twice. So this is a rewatchable movie. It just has its moments. It's not oh my gosh thrilling, but I like it. Anyway, The Breakfast Club like a sandwich. The film, yes. Now I haven't watched it in, I don't know, maybe 10 years? No. Maybe 5 years, so I probably got the dialogue wrong. But anyway, so that's what I thought about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Uncle Roger. Hiya. All right, you guys. I'm gonna see how long is the next chapter. 65, 37. I think I can do it. It's a little shorter than this one. Yes, I'll read it. And yeah, let's do this. Let's do the next chapter, you guys, because that one was quite shorter. Let's do it. Oopsie. Noodles Dumplings Kimchi has watched The Breakfast Club and is recommending Crusher to watch it. Yes, watch it. It's a good movie. If you liked Ferris Bueller, 16 Candles, all of those things, all of those movies is from this Pretty in Pink. They're from the same director, I think. And I think also he's the same guy that was behind Home Alone, I think. Yeah. So anyway, if you have any movies you like from around the 80s, drop them in the chat in the comments. I probably have watched it, probably not, but I do like a good 80s movie. 80s and 90s, those are like most of the movies I've ever watched are from that era, those eras. All right, continuing on with Jane Eyre. Chapter 31. I think I need some plastic. Hold on. Chapstick. Today's reading is brought to you by Soft Lips. Raspberry this time. Just kidding. I am not being sponsored by Soft Lips, but if they want to sponsor me, they could. All right. Chapstick added. Footloose is good. Yeah. Classic. All right, let's watch this. Let's read. Chapter 31. My home, then, when I at last find a home, is a cottage, a little room with whitewashed walls and a sanded floor, containing 4 painted chairs and a table, a clock, a cupboard with 2 or 3 plates and dishes, and a set of tea things in a delf. Above, a chamber of the same dimensions as the kitchen, with a deal bedstead and chest of drawers, small, yet too large to be filled with my scanty wardrobe, though the kindness of my gentle and generous friends has increased that by a modest stock of such things as are necessary. It is evening. I have dismissed, with the fee of an orange, the little orphan who serves me as a handmaid. I am sitting alone on the hearth. This morning, the village school opened. I had 20 scholars, but 3 of them can read. None write or cipher. Several knit, and a few sew a little. They speak with the broadest accent of the district. At present, they and I have a difficulty in understanding each other's language. Some of them are unmannered, rough, intractable, as well as ignorant, while others are docile, have a wish to learn, and evince a disposition that pleases me. I must not forget that these coarsely clad little peasants are flesh and blood as good as the science of gentlest genealogy, and that the germs of native excellence, refinement, intelligence, kind feeling, are as likely to exist in their hearts as those of the best born. My duty will be to develop these germs. Surely I shall find some happiness in discharging that office. Much enjoyment I do not expect in the life opening before me, yet it will, doubtless, if I regulate my mind and exert my powers as I ought, yield me enough to live on from day to day. Was I very gleeful, settled, content during the hours I passed in yonder bare, humble schoolroom this morning and afternoon? Not to deceive myself, I must reply, no. I felt desolate to a degree. I felt, yes, idiot that I am, I felt degraded. I doubted I had taken a step which sank, instead of raising me in the scale of social existence. I was weakly dismayed at the ignorance, the poverty, the coarseness of all I heard and saw around me. But let me not hate and despise myself too much for these feelings. I know them to be wrong. That is a great step gained. I shall strive to overcome them. Tomorrow, I trust, I shall get the better of them partially, and in a few weeks, perhaps, they will be quite subdued. In a few months, it is possible, the happiness of seeing progress and a change for the better in my scholars may substitute gratification for disgust. Meanwhile, let me ask myself one question. Which is better? To have surrendered to temptation, listened to passion, made no painful effort, no struggle, but to have sunk down in the silken snare, fallen asleep on the flowers covering it, wakened in a southern clime, amongst the luxuries of a pleasure villa, to have been now living in France, Mr. Rochester's mistress, delirious with his love half my time, for he would, oh yes, he would have loved me well for a while. He did love me. No one will ever love me so again. I shall never more know the sweet homage given to beauty, youth, and grace, for never to anyone else shall I seem to possess these charms. He was fond and proud of me. It is what no man besides will ever be. But where am I wandering, and what am I saying, and above all feeling? Whether it is better, I asked, to be a slave in a fool's paradise at Marseilles, fevered with delusive bliss one hour, suffocating with the bitterest tears of remorse and shame the next, or to be a village schoolmistress, free and honest, in a breezy mountain nook, in the healthy heart of England. Yes, I feel now that I was right when I adhered to principle and law, and scorned and crushed the insane promptings of a frenzied moment. God directed me to a correct choice. I thank His providence for the guidance. Having brought my eventide musings to this point, I rose, went to my door, and looked at the sunset of the harvest day, and at the quiet fields before my cottage, which, with the school, was distant 1/2 mile from the village. The birds were singing their last strains. The air was mild, the dew was balm. While I looked, I thought myself happy, and was surprised to find myself ere long weeping. And why? For the doom which had reft me from adhesion to my master. For him I was no more to see, for the desperate grief and fatal fury, consequences of my departure, which might now perhaps be dragging him from the path of right, too far to leave hope of ultimate restoration thither. And this thought I turned my face aside from the lovely sky of eve and lonely vale of Morton. I say lonely, for in that bend of it, visible to me, there was no building apparent, save the church and the parsonage, half hid in trees, and, quite at the extremity, the roof of the Vale Hall, where the rich Mr. Oliver and his daughter lived. I hid my eyes and leant my head against the stone frame of the door, but soon a slight noise near the wicket, which shut in my tiny garden from the meadow beyond it, made me look up. A dog, old Carlo, Mr. Rivers's pointer, as I saw in a moment, was pushing the gate with his nose, and St. John himself leant upon it with folded arms, his brow knit, his gaze, grave almost to displeasure, fixed on me. I asked him to come in. No, I cannot stay. I have only brought you a little parcel my sisters left for you. I think it contains a color box, pencils, and paper. I approached to take it. A welcome gift it was. He examined my face, I thought, with austerity as I came near. The traces of tears were doubtless very visible upon it. Have you found your first day's work harder than you expected? He asked. Oh, no. On the contrary, I think in time I shall get on with my scholars very well. But perhaps your accommodations, your cottage, your furniture, have disappointed your expectations. They are in truth scanty enough, but my cottage is clean and weatherproof, my furniture sufficient and commodious. All I see has made me thankful, not despondent. I am not absolutely such a fool and sensualist as to regret the absence of carpet, a sofa, and silver plate. Besides, 5 weeks ago I had nothing. I was an outcast, a beggar, a vagrant. Now I have acquaintance, a home, a business. I wonder at the goodness of God, the generosity of my friends, the bounty of my lot. I do not repine. But you feel solitude and oppression. The little house there behind you is dark and empty. I have hardly had time to enjoy a sense of tranquillity, much less to grow impatient under one of loneliness. Very well. I hope you feel the content you express. At any rate, your good sense will tell you that it is too soon yet to yield to the vacillating fears of Lot's wife. What you had left before I saw you, of course I do not know, but I counsel you to resist firmly every temptation which would incline you to look back. Pursue your present career steadily, for some months at least. It is what I mean to do, I answered. St. John continued. It is hard work to control the workings of inclination and turn the bent of nature, but that it may be done, I know from experience. God has given us in a measure the power to make our own fate, and when our energies seem to demand a sustenance they cannot get, when our will strains after a path they may not follow, we need neither starve from inanition, nor stand still in despair. We have but to seek another nourishment for the mind, as strong as the forbidden food it longed to taste, and perhaps purer, and to hew out for the adventurous foot a road as direct and broad as the one fortune has blocked up against us, if rougher than it. A year ago, I was myself intensely miserable, because I thought I made a mistake in entering the ministry. Its uniform duties wearied me to death. I burned for the more active life of the world, for the more exciting toils of a literary career, for the destiny of an artist, author, orator, anything rather than that of a priest. Yes, the heart of a politician, of a soldier, of a votary of glory, a lover of renown, a luster after power, beat under my curate's surplice. I considered my life was so wretched it must be changed or I must die. After a season of darkness and struggling, like broke, and relief fell. My cramped existence all at once spread out to a plain without bounds. My powers heard a call from heaven to rise, gather their full strength, spread their wings, and mount beyond ken. God had an errand for me to bear which afar, to delight it well, skill and strength, courage and eloquence, the best qualifications of soldier, statesman, and orator were all needed. For these all center in a good missionary. A missionary I resolved to be. From that moment my state of mind changed. The fetters dissolved and dropped from every faculty, leaving nothing of bondage but its galling soreness, which time only can heal. My father indeed imposed a determination, but since his death I have not a legitimate obstacle to contend with. Some affairs settled, a successor for Morton provided, an entanglement or two of the feelings broken or cut asunder, a last conflict with human weakness in which I know I shall overcome, because I have vowed that I will overcome, and I leave Europe for the East. He said this in his peculiar, subdued, yet emphatic voice, looking, when he had ceased speaking, not at me but at the setting sun, at which I looked too. Both he and I had our backs toward the path leading up to the field, to the wicket. We had heard no step on that grass-grown track. The water running in the vale was the one lulling sound of the hour and scene. We might well then start, when a gay voice, sweet as a silver bell, exclaimed, "Good evening, Mr. Rivers, and good evening, old Carlo. Your dog is quicker to recognize his friends than you are, sir. He pricked his ears and wagged his tail when I was at the bottom of the field, and you have your back towards me now." It was true, though Mr. Rivers had started at the first of those musical accents, as if a thunderbolt had split a cloud over his head. He stood yet, at the close of the sentence, in the same attitude in which the speaker had surprised him, his arm resting on the gate, his face directed toward the west. He turned at last with measured deliberation. A vision, as it seemed to me, had risen at his side. There appeared within 3 feet of him a form clad in pure white, a youthful, graceful form, full yet fine in contour, and when, after bending to caress Carlo, it lifted its head and threw back a long veil, there bloomed under his glance a face of perfect beauty. Perfect beauty is a strong expression, but I do not retrace or qualify it. As sweet features as ever the temperate clime of Albion moulded, as pure hues of rose and lily as ever her humid gales and vapory skies generated and screened, justified in this instance the term. No charm was wanting, no defect was perceptible. The young girl had regular and delicate lineaments, eyes shaped and colored as we see them in lovely pictures, large and dark and full. The long and shadowy eyelash which encircles a fine eye with so soft a fascination, the penciled brow which gives such clearness, the white smooth forehead which adds such repose to the livelier beauties of tint and ray, the cheek oval, fresh and smooth, the lips fresh too, ruddy, healthy, sweetly formed, the even and gleaming teeth without flaw, the small dimpled chin, the ornament of rich, plenteous tresses, All advantages, in short, which combined realized the ideal of beauty, were fully hers. I wondered as I looked at this fair creature. I admired her with my whole heart. Nature had surely formed her in a partial mood, and forgetting her usual stinted stepmother dole of gifts, had endowed this, her darling, with a grand dame's bounty. What did St. John Rivers think of this earthly angel? I naturally asked myself that question as I saw him turn to her and look at her, and, as naturally, I sought the answer to the inquiry in his countenance. He had already withdrawn his eye from the Peri, and was looking at a humble tuft of daisies which grew by the wicket. "A lovely evening, but late for you to be out alone," he said as he crushed the snowy heads of the close flowers with his foot. "What? How dare you crush the daisies? What did they do to you?" Symbolism, maybe. "Oh, I only came home from from blank." I wonder what town that can be. Sheffield? I don't know. "Oh, I only came back home from blank town." She mentioned the name of a large town some 20 miles distant. "This afternoon, Papa told me you had opened your school and that the new mistress was come. And so I put on my bonnet after tea and ran up the valley to see her. Is this she?" She pointed to me. "It is," said St. John. "Do you think you shall like Morton?" she asked of me, with a direct and naive simplicity of tone and manner, pleasing, if childlike. "I hope I shall. I have many inducements to do so." "Did you find your scholars as attentive as you expected?" "Quite." "Do you like your house?" "Very much." "Have I furnished it nicely?" "Very nicely indeed." "And made a good choice of an attendant for you in Alice Wood?" "You have indeed. She is teachable and handy." This, then, I thought, is Miss Oliver, the heiress, favored, it seems, in the gifts of fortune, as well as in those of nature. What a happy combination of the planets presided over her birth, I wonder. "I shall come up and no, this is her. "I shall come up and help you to teach sometimes," she added. "It will be a change for me to visit you now and then, and I like the change. Mr. Rivers, I have been so gay during my stay at Blanktown. Last night, or rather this morning, I was dancing till 2 o'clock. The regiment there are stationed. I don't know what number regiment, 1st regiment, 4th regiment. The regiment are stationed there since the riots, and the officers are the most agreeable men in the world. They put all our young knife grinders and scissor merchants to shame." It seemed to me that Mr. St. John's under lip protruded, and his upper lip curled a moment. His mouth certainly looked a deal compressed, and the lower part of his face unusually stern and square, as the laughing girl gave him this information. He lifted his gaze, too, from the daisies and turned it on her. An unsmiling, a searching, a meaning gaze it was. She answered it with a second laugh, and laughter well became her youth, her roses, her dimples, her bright eyes. As he stood, mute and grave, she again fell to caressing Carlo. "Poor Carlo loves me. He is not stern and distant to his friends, and if he could speak, he would not be silent." As she patted the dog's head, bending with native grace before his young and austere master, I saw a glow rise to that master's face. I saw his solemn eye melt with sudden fire and flicker with resistless emotion. Flushed and kindled thus, he looked nearly as beautiful for a man as she for a woman. His chest heaved once, and if his large heart, weary of despotic constriction, had expanded, despite the will, and made a vigorous bound for the attainment of liberty. But he curbed it, I think, as a resolute rider would curb a rearing steed. He responded neither by word nor movement to the gentle advances made him. "Papa says you never come to see us now," continued Miss Oliver, looking up. "You are quite a stranger at Bell Hall. He is alone this evening, and not very well. Will you return with me and visit him?" "It is not a seasonable hour to intrude on Mr. Oliver," answered St. John. "Not a reasonable hour, but I declare it is. It is just the hour when Papa most wants company, when the works are closed and he has no business to occupy him. Now, Mr. Rivers, do come. Why are you so very shy and so very somber? She filled up the hiatus of his silence, left by a reply of her own. Oh, I forgot! She exclaimed, shaking her beautiful curled head as if shocked at herself. I am so giddy and thoughtless. Do excuse me. It had slipped my memory that you have good reasons to be indisposed for joining in my chatter. Diana and Mary have left you, and Moor House is shut up, and you're so lonely. I am sure I pity you. Do come and see Papa. Not tonight, Miss Rosamond. Not tonight. Mr. St. John spoke almost like an automaton. Himself only knew the effort it cost him thus to refuse. Well, if you're so obstinate, I will leave you, for I dare not stay any longer. The dew begins to fall. Good evening. She held out her hand. He just touched it. Good evening, he repeated in a voice low and hollow as an echo. She turned, but in a moment returned. Are you well? She asked. She might put the question. His face was blanched as her gown. Quite well, he enunciated, and with a bow, he left the gate. She went one way, he another. She turned twice to gaze after him as she tripped fairy-like down the field. He, as he strode firmly across, never turned at all. This spectacle of another suffering and sacrifice rapt my thoughts from exclusive meditation on my own. Diana Rivers had designated her brother inexorable as death. She had not exaggerated. End of chapter. All right. Very interesting little dynamic here with Rosamond Oliver and St. John. So we thought that St. John was like a very austere kind of guy, stone-like, but even he is made of flesh, and he has a weakness, and Oliver is his weakness. And when he was talking to Jane, he was saying there are two things, or very few things, that still tie him back, like keep him, like emotional entanglements. There's some emotional entanglements that still kind of like keep him in England. I'm guessing one of them would be his family, his sisters, caring for them. But the other one is definitely this Miss Oliver. But dude, man. My dude. Okay. So there's this beautiful, and not just like, Jane is an artist, you guys, so she knows about aesthetics. So she described her as an angel on earth, perfect features, beautiful form, and with the added virtues of youth and fortune. And St. John is being obstinate and is absolutely decided to like not pay attention to her advances, because the girl is literally throwing herself at his feet. Like, does he want to even? Okay, this is basically a embossed invitation, dude. And now St. John is like, no, he will not, because remember, he has a duty and an ambition, and he wants to become a missionary. Yeah, St. John. Anyway, what did you guys think of these two? Meanwhile, I'm gonna read back on the comments. So going back to what Jane was feeling as she was reflecting on her choices. Remember, she's thinking like, would I, like, putting things on the balance, did I do well in choosing this path? She doesn't sugarcoat her situation. It is a job, and she is independent in a way. She gets to run the school as she wants and stuff. But again, it's gonna take a while before she feels satisfaction from her job. Like, right, it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be an uphill battle to educate these girls and to make them shine. You know, it's gonna take all of her faculties, and it's humble work. And she's alone and lonely, and she's feeling it. I would be feeling it too. The first time I remember ever being alone, like no parents, no family, nobody, being like out of, like, as an adult, I was just fine. But it is during sunset, you guys. During sunset, that's like the saddest time, the saddest and most loneliest time. Night is fine because you can do whatever, go to sleep, whatever. And in the day, you're too busy. But it is like during sunset that things get super melancholy. At least for me, sunset has always been a melancholy time. I don't know. So poor Jane, she was having like a feeling almost like she wanted to cry, or feeling lonely, feeling a little downcast, a little disappointed and dispirited after her first day's work. But, you know, St. John came and he gave her, in his own way, encouragement. I don't know how encouraged you might be by his words, but he gave himself as an example. He's like, I was in your shoes just a year ago. My work felt like a degradation. I wanted to be something bigger, something famous, somebody, and I don't blame him. It's ambitious. He was ambitious. He wanted the reclaim and renown of the world. He wanted to be an orator, an artist, a writer, and that's fine, you know. But the circumstances in his life required that he do that he take up a job as a parishioner, as a parish, no, as a priest, I guess. So anyway, as a curate, there we go. So because let's remember, in the hierarchy of things, if their father had not been defrauded of money, he would have continued to be a gentleman. The only reason why the girls have to go out to become governesses, and he absolutely has to have a profession, is because they don't have money. Usually people in these days, they would just pass off their money from, like, once they die, he would inherit the father's estate. Again, he said, like, I have just found out I basically received an old house, a wide, vast fields, some old trees, and a weather-beaten garden. That's all he inherited. Unfortunately, he's not able to live a life of leisure as a gentleman, and he would have been able to, you know, pursue other vocations such as, I don't know, like being a lawyer if he wanted to, or being a writer, having that kind of stuff, going out to the politics, to, you know, because once he was out of university, he had to get a job and support himself, and the only thing what he had gone to university to do was to become a curate. So he could have become a soldier, but again, if you wanted to be an officer, a lot of the times, at least as far as I remember, not in Jane Austen's day, you had to buy a commission to become an officer. So it took money to become a soldier, be in the military. You didn't really want to be like a regular soldier. You wanted to be an officer, like a captain or a colonel or whatever. And that took, again, it was all about money and connections. And if you did not have money and connections, it was kind of hard to get along in life. So that's why he feels like all of his options in life are like, yeah, he feels discouraged. So I don't blame him for feeling discouraged. It's just, I don't know, man, like, I wish he would be a little bit more careful in not applying his same standards to Jane. In a way, Jane and he have like a same understanding. She's not one who would be happy to stay like in such a quiet, confined life. Neither would he be, but they're not the same kind of people. He can't assume some things about Jane. He called her impassioned. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But anyway, But I think the impassioned one is him. He's just keeping it really, really hidden underneath. I don't know how he does it. He resisted beautiful Rosamund's charms. Pretty interesting. So yeah, Crusher says, I guess she is thinking about how hard it is to stick to your convictions and principles. It's pretty admirable. It is admirable. Not many people would have chosen to do the right thing, especially when she knows. See, and here's the other thing: it's not that she's suffering because she is like feeling bereft of his love, and that she does feel bereft, but she is also afraid for him because he said like, if you go, like, how am I going to get by? And, you know, it's kind of toxic though, because there's like those kind of boyfriends that say like, I will, well, maybe not as you know, dramatic, but he's like, there's some boyfriends that say like, if you go or if you dump me, I will, you know, unalive myself. It was kind of like an emotional blackmail or something. So she feels like that kind of like, I don't know how to say it in English. In Spanish, we call it pesar, un pesar, like a burden. Yeah, like a burden, I guess, for Rochester's well-being, not just his physical well-being, but his spiritual well-being, because he said like if she left, he would just basically abandon himself back into dissolution and maybe even like turn even worse than before, just go into the world and live an even worse life than before. I don't know. So she feels that burden, and I say, ladies out there, I absolutely understand. We are, by nature, many of us, most of us, we feel conditioned to save, to nurture, to heal. You know, I can fix him. We feel responsible for our partner's emotional well-being, I guess. But I have encountered several nasty breakups where a lot of the things was like feeling responsible for the other when it's not your duty to look out for a person's emotional, especially spiritual, to have that burden, you know. Everybody has a choice, and I mean, everybody's an adult. So I wish Jane didn't feel that kind of burden. But I guess if you really care for someone, you will still feel that burden. It's just like in your mind, you know, you don't have to, you're not responsible. But in the heart, tell that to your heart. Tell it to my heart. Anyway. So Little Butterfly says, why is he trying to make her feel bad about her situation? Is he trying to feel better about his own by having her show her regret hers? Yeah, he wants to, I think he kind of like wants to get to the bottom of her story. Maybe trying to push her buttons to see what will make her react. Or maybe he's just in his own way trying to like encourage her by like going that route. Crusher, I'm gonna assume that you were sarcastic when you wrote the comment. You wrote, no, St. John, focus, brother. Romance is only temporary, but God is forever. And it's true. But God, I don't believe God asks us to forsake the needs of our heart. I think God formed us in such a way that we're not just spiritual beings, we're not just physical beings, we're not just emotional. We're formed with needs that need to be met: emotional, physical, psychological, all those needs. They're given by God, so it's not a sin. I don't know why St. John will just close himself off like that. Dude, God is not asking that kind of sacrifice from you. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I don't believe in that kind of sacrifice required to serve God, but okay. Whatever, St. John, you're just... Yeah, anyway. Little Butterfly says that she looked back at him. Yeah, I feel so sorry for Rosamund, you guys. Rosamund is dying. Like, we forget that St. John is like super handsome. And of course, you guys, of course, not just his outward, but a girl will be attracted to the guy who seems like cold, you know, like who seems like brooding. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. Like, a lot of times girls will be attracted by the dude that's that guy. So poor Rosamund. I mean, she's still young. As a teenager, I would have, I don't know if she's a teenager, but I'm possibly sure she's already in debuted, so she's out in society, so she's a marriageable age. If she's going out dancing in other towns till 2 o'clock in the morning, she's definitely of marriageable age, but she's still young enough that she's very impressionable. She probably has had a crush on St. John since she was younger, since they were kids. So she's still kind of besotted and she wants him and she's trying to get him. I feel so sorry for her, the poor girl. Yeah. F in the chat for poor Rosamund, but I don't think he's the one for you, Rosamund. He's not the one for you. But yeah, she was so sad. She looked twice back at him, and he never turned around to look back at her. Dang. Yeah, Crusher, thank you for pointing out faith and romance aren't mutually exclusive, St. John. And Crusher thinks, I think Jane is a good role model for women and girls. See, I also agree. I like. I mean, she's not a perfect character. She would be really boring if she were perfect. But at the core, she has a core, like a. They call it. There's a writer I really like. She says it like, you have to be as true to your convictions as a needle to the pole, you know, like in the compass. Like, you have to have that inner core, those unshakable fundamental values that you will not compromise on, come rain or shine. Though the heavens collapse, you will still maintain those values, and that's what's important. And we see. Yeah, Crusher did F on the chat. Yeah, I know. F on the chat for me too. So yeah, I like Jane Eyre. And trust me, when I read this book, I think it was either late junior high or early high school. I was blown away. I had watched the movie when I was like maybe in junior high, and I was like, stupid movie, I don't like it. I was like, this is such a boring, gloomy movie. I mean, I did find it like to pass the time, and this was 1996 version. I just didn't connect with Rochester and Jane and all the thing. I was like why is she so into this guy? But when I read the book, and I really connected with Jane, just some, like, I was like, this is really interesting stuff, really good stuff. It was I think one of the first like truly classic books I read. Well, maybe the second one. No, never mind. I was already reading quite a lot of books by then. I mean, I discovered Edgar Allan Poe when I was like 6th grade, and I devoured all. I loved Edgar Allan Poe. I should probably read some books. Ooh, some stories, some spooky stories by Edgar Allan Poe. But anyway, yeah, she struck us a very interesting, and I like her character. I still like her. It's one of my favorite books. Anyway. And says, oh, Magpie, don't feel lonely. Do I feel lonely? Oh, I know, when sunset comes around. Yeah, it's a lonely time. Kind of like melancholic. Not lonely, but melancholic. Again, like, it just comes when I was a little kid. I had, there were many times where I was kind of left at home by myself. I didn't have a babysitter. Or maybe it was my grandma, but she would go to sleep really early, like take a nap, and then she wouldn't wake up until maybe like 8 o'clock. So like the house, I lived in a really large house. The house would go like really quiet. And for some reason, I didn't want to turn on the lights. So I would just, you know, hang out in the upstairs, kind of like a little parlor where we had my little bookcase and a big, huge window, through which I saw the sunlight just fading and retreating, and I was by myself. My parents were working, my sister was at school, and I was just there. The house was quiet, and I did not want to turn on the lights, you guys. So I don't know. And to this day, I have that kind of thing where I like it, but I don't like it to be alone during that time. I don't know. It's kind of like melancholic. And sometimes I lean into it, but sometimes I try to avoid it. Like at that time, I like try to get some work done or tune on the TV or whatever, because it's just kind of a lonely time. Night and day are fine. Anyway, so enough about that. I think we had a good reading session, you guys. I had lots of fun. Thank you for joining me. We will return to reading some more Jane Eyre on Wednesday, and we are going to see what happens with. We're going to see a little bit more of this drama. I think we're going to get a little bit more of St. John and Jane also working at the school. Several developments are going to happen soon, so don't you leave off. Join me next time. The story will get pretty interesting, I promise you. All right, everybody, it was lovely to see you and to talk to you and chat with you. Hello to all of you who were on the chat. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And until until Wednesday, I will see you. Take care, everybody. Bye.